This 55-year-old man had spent 10 years preparing to die, until a white wolf looked straight down his rifle barrel with eyes identical to his dead daughter's. Elias Thorne had decided long ago. This bullet would be the last time he pulled the trigger. Not for suicide, but to grant mercy to a dying creature in a Montana blizzard. But when he looked into the eyes of the trapped wolf, eyes so hauntingly defiant, eyes that refused death even when death was the only option, he saw the most horrifying moment of his life replayed. His 12-year-old daughter, pinned beneath an avalanche, looking at him with those same eyes before she stopped breathing in his arms. He lowered the rifle. That insane decision would trigger a chain of events that would shake the small town of Bitter Creek to its core. A murder conspiracy disguised as hunting, forest fires in the dead of night, and a blood pact between man and beast, a pact both knew would end in death, or an unexpected redemption neither saw coming. The scope's crosshairs wouldn't stay still. Elias told himself it was the cold. Montana winters had a way of stealing feeling from your fingers, turning bone to ice, making even the simplest task feel impossible. But he knew better. At 55, a man knows when he's lying to himself. The white wolf was dying. That much was certain. The steel trap had done its job with brutal efficiency, crushing bone and tendon until the leg hung at an angle that made Elias's stomach turn. She should have been dead already. Should have bled out hours ago or frozen in the storm that was burying the mountains under 3 feet of fresh snow. But she wasn't dead. She was standing. Her body swayed with exhaustion, white fur matted with blood that looked black against the snow. But she stood, and beneath her, sheltered by her failing body, lay something small and still. A pup, already frozen, already gone. But the mother wouldn't leave, wouldn't abandon what she'd already lost. Elias's finger tightened on the trigger. This was mercy. This was kindness. One clean shot and her suffering would end. He'd done it before, dozens of times. Wounded deer, coyotes caught in illegal snares, even a bear once, gut shot by a careless hunter and left to die slow. He'd ended their pain without hesitation. So why couldn't he pull the trigger now? The wolf's head lifted. Through the falling snow, across 40 yards of frozen wasteland, her eyes found his. Gold eyes that should have been dulled by pain and blood loss. Instead, they burned. They accused. They understood exactly what he was about to do. And they looked exactly like Sarah's eyes had looked 10 years ago. The memory hit him like a fist to the chest. His daughter's face, pale in the darkness of the overturned truck. Her voice so calm, it broke his heart. "Daddy, it's okay. You can let go now." The weight of her hand going slack in his. The moment everything that mattered stopped mattering. The rifle scope blurred. Elias blinked hard, trying to clear his vision. But the wolf had become something else in his sight. Not an animal, not prey. Something that deserved better than a bullet from a broken man who'd spent 10 years wishing he'd died instead of her. His hands moved before his brain gave permission. Safety on, rifle lowered. And then he was walking forward through the snow toward certain injury, possible death, and a choice that would change everything. The wolf watched him come. She didn't run, couldn't run, just stood there, protecting what was already lost, refusing to accept what couldn't be changed. Elias understood that feeling better than anyone alive. "Easy," he heard himself say, though the wind stole the word instantly. "I'm not here to hurt you." But they both knew that was a lie. Because sometimes the worst hurt comes from the ones trying to help. Sometimes mercy looks a lot like cruelty. And sometimes the only way to save something is to refuse to let it go. even when every logical voice says you should. The trap's steel jaws gleamed in the failing light. The wolf's eyes never left his face. And somewhere in the gathering storm, Elias Thorne made a choice that would resurrect ghosts, expose corruption, and prove that some debts can only be repaid in blood and sacrifice. But first, he had to survive what came next. The rifle scope trembled. Not from the cold, though the Montana blizzard had long since stolen all feeling from Elias Thorne's fingers. Not from age, though 55 winters had carved deep lines into his weathered face. The tremor came from somewhere deeper, a place he thought had frozen solid 10 years ago. Through the crosshairs, a shape moved against the white. Arctic wolf, female. Maybe 4 years old. Her coat should have been her camouflage, but the blood trail gave her away, dark red droplets screaming against the virgin snow like accusations. Elias had tracked her for 3 hours, following the erratic pattern that told him everything he needed to know. The right hind leg dragged. Steel trap, probably. One of Caleb Vance's illegal snares, set deep in protected territory where no one with a badge ever bothered to look. The ranch owner had been losing cattle to predators, or so he claimed. Easier to kill the wolves than fix his fences. The wind shifted, carrying with it the wolf's scent. Blood and something else. Desperation, maybe. Elias knew that smell. He'd worn it himself once. His finger rested on the trigger. This was a mercy, he told himself. The wolf wouldn't survive the night. The trap had mangled bone and tendon beyond any hope of healing. Even if she somehow gnawed herself free, infection would take her within days. Out here, suffering didn't end with hope. It ended with a bullet or starvation, and he'd always believed the bullet was kinder. The wolf stopped moving. For a moment, Elias thought she'd finally collapsed. Then he saw it, the subtle shift of her body, the way she positioned herself over something in the snow. His scope traveled downward, adjusting focus. A pup, no more than 8 weeks old, its silver fur already dusted with ice crystals that would never melt. Dead. Had been for hours, judging by the rigid way it lay. The mother had been carrying it, dragging her broken leg and her dead child through the storm, refusing to leave it behind. Elias's breath caught. His finger loosened on the trigger. The wolf's head lifted. She looked directly at the rifle, directly at him, as if she'd known he was there all along. Her eyes held no fear, no plea for mercy, just a vast, terrible understanding. She knew what was coming. She'd probably welcomed it. But she wouldn't move, wouldn't abandon the small body beneath her, even for survival's ghost of a chance. Those eyes. God, those eyes. Sarah's eyes had looked like that. The memory hit him like a physical blow. 10 years collapsed into 10 seconds. His daughter, 12 years old, pinned beneath the overturned truck while the avalanche roared down the mountain. Her leg crushed, the cold already turning her lips blue, and those eyes looking up at him with that same terrible understanding. Daddy, you have to go. Get help, I'm not leaving you. Daddy, please. He'd held on until his hands were numb, until he couldn't feel her pulse anymore, until the rescuers had to pry his frozen fingers from her jacket. 3 hours, they said later. She'd been gone for 2 of them, but he'd held on, refusing to believe what those eyes had already known. The wolf hadn't made a sound, no whimper, no growl. She just watched him, waiting for the bullet that would end her vigil. Elias lowered the rifle. His hands moved automatically, muscle memory from another life when he'd been someone different. He unslung the weapon, engaged the safety, let it drop into the snow beside him. The storm was intensifying. He could barely see 20 feet now. Didn't matter. He knew where she was. The approach took forever. Each step calculated, deliberate. The wolf's ears pinned back as he drew closer, her lips peeling away from teeth designed to tear through hide and bone. The warning was clear. She had nothing left to lose. "Easy," Elias heard himself say, though the wind stole the word instantly. "Easy, girl? 10 feet? 5. Close enough now to see the trap's cruel efficiency. The steel jaws had closed just above the hock, crushing through muscle and grinding bone to splinters. The leg hung at an obscene angle, held by threads of tendon and skin. Blood had frozen in black rivulets down her white fur. She lunged. Even crippled, even dying, the wolf was faster than he expected. Teeth snapped inches from his face. He jerked backward, lost his footing on the ice beneath the snow, went down hard. The wolf tried to follow, but the trap's chain yanked her short. She yelped, the first sound she'd made, a sharp knife of pain that cut through the wind. Elias scrambled to his feet, heart hammering. This was insane. He should shoot her from a distance and be done with it. That was the reasonable thing. The human thing. But reason had died in him 10 years ago, buried under 3 tons of snow and regret. He pulled off his heavy glove with his teeth, reached into his coat for the multi-tool he always carried. The wolf watched him, sides heaving, but she'd stopped lunging. Some dim awareness seemed to pass between them, a negotiation without words. "I'm going to get that trap off," he said, knowing she couldn't understand, but needing to say it anyway. "You're going to bite me. Probably take off a finger or 2. But I'm going to get it off." He moved in again, slower this time. The wolf's growl rose from somewhere deep in her chest, a sound that promised violence. But she didn't lunge. She stood rigid, trembling, every muscle tensed for the betrayal she expected. The trap's release mechanism was frozen solid. Elias had to use both hands, applying pressure that made his joints scream. The wolf's breath came in rapid clouds. He could smell her, wild and sharp and alive despite everything. The mechanism gave with a crack, like breaking ice. The jaws opened. The wolf's leg dropped free and she collapsed. For one horrible second, Elias thought she'd died, the shock finally too much. Then her chest expanded with a deep, shuddering breath. He should leave now. Back away. Let nature take whatever course it would. But the pup's body lay there in the snow, and the wolf was trying to reach it, dragging herself forward with her front legs while the ruined hind leg trailed uselessly behind. Elias found himself moving before thought could stop him. He stripped off his coat, the cold hitting him like a fist. Carefully, so carefully, he wrapped the wolf in it. She snapped once, teeth grazing his wrist, drawing blood. Then she went still, either from exhaustion or acceptance. He lifted her. She was lighter than expected, all bone and sinew beneath the thick fur. The dead pup fell from her protection, hitting the snow with a sound like a sigh. The wolf's head twisted, trying to see it. A small, broken sound escaped her throat. "I know," Elias whispered. "I know." The blizzard swallowed them both as he turned toward home, carrying his impossible burden. Behind him, the small body disappeared beneath fresh snow. A grave marked only by silence and the wind's keening that sounded almost like crying. By the time Elias reached his cabin, he couldn't feel his feet. The wolf had stopped struggling, gone limp in his arms. He couldn't tell if she was unconscious or dead. And terror he hadn't felt in a decade seized his chest. Not again. Not this time. The garage smelled like motor oil and abandonment. Elias kicked the door shut behind him, his burden still clutched against his chest. The wolf's breathing came shallow and quick, each exhale a small cloud of vapor in the unheated space. He laid her on the workbench, shoving aside wrenches and parts of an engine he'd been meaning to rebuild for 3 years. His hands shook as he unwrapped his coat from around her body. The leg looked worse in the light. Bone fragments gleamed white through torn muscle. The trap had done its job well. The wolf's eyes opened. Gold irises fixed on him with an intensity that froze him mid-motion. No gratitude lived in that gaze, only calculation. She was measuring him, deciding if he was predator or prey, whether to use her last strength to fight or flee. "Stay," he said, though the command felt absurd, as if a wild animal would obey, as if anything in this world listened anymore. He found the first aid kit under the sink, the one he'd stocked years ago when Sarah was young and prone to scraped knees and splinters. His hands remembered the motions. Clean the wound, stop the bleeding. But this wasn't a scraped knee. This was trauma that required a surgeon, antibiotics he didn't have, skills he'd never learned. The wolf tried to rise when he approached with the antiseptic. Her front legs scrambled for purchase on the metal surface, but the effort cost her. She collapsed back, panting, and that small broken sound came again from her throat. Elias pressed a towel to the wound, applying pressure. Blood soaked through immediately, warm against his frozen fingers. The wolf's body went rigid. Every instinct screamed at her to fight, to bite, to tear apart the thing causing her pain. But she didn't. She lay there, trembling, watching him with those terrible eyes that understood too much. Time lost meaning. Could have been minutes. Could have been hours. The bleeding finally slowed. Elias wrapped the leg as best he could, his grandfather's voice echoing across decades. Make it tight enough to hold, loose enough to let blood through. A tourniquet saves the life, but kills the limb. When he finished, his shirt was soaked with sweat and blood. The wolf hadn't moved, hadn't made a sound beyond those shallow, rapid breaths. Shock, probably. Her body's last mercy before the real dying began. He needed help. Real help. And there was only one person in Bitter Creek who might provide it, though calling him would open doors Elias had spent 10 years keeping sealed. The phone rang 6 times before a gravel voice answered. "This better be good. Doc Holloway. It's Elias Thorne." Silence. Then a bitter laugh. Jesus Christ. The ghost of Bitter Creek actually uses a telephone. "What do you want, Thorne? I'm retired. I need you to come out to my place. At midnight? In a blizzard? Whatever's wrong with you can wait till morning. It's not for me." Another pause. Longer this time. "You got a woman out there?" "No." "Then what?" Elias looked at the wolf. She was watching him, those gold eyes never blinking. "Something that'll die if you don't come." That's not much of a sales pitch, I know. The old veterinarian sighed, a sound like wind through broken windows. "I'll be there in an hour. This better not be some drunk nonsense, Thorne. I'm too old for your particular brand of crazy." The line went dead. Elias set the phone down and turned back to the wolf. She'd closed her eyes, but he could tell she wasn't sleeping. Her ears tracked every sound, every movement. Still alert, still waiting for the betrayal. He filled a bowl with water, set it near her head. She ignored it. He tried to drip some on her tongue, but she turned away, a low warning growl building in her chest. "Stubborn," he muttered. "You'll die of thirst before you'll trust me." The wolf's eyes opened again, fixing on him with what almost seemed like contempt, as if she understood perfectly and was calling him a hypocrite. Fair enough. Headlights swept across the garage window 40 minutes later. Elias heard the truck door slam, boots crunching through snow. Doc Holloway appeared in the doorway, a black medical bag in one gnarled hand, his face set in lines of permanent displeasure. He was 70 if he was a day, bent by time and bad choices, his white hair wild beneath a wool cap. But his eyes were sharp as he surveyed the scene. The wolf, the blood. Elias standing there like a man at a confessional. You've got to be kidding me. She'll die without help. She'll die with it too, most likely. Doc moved closer, professional instinct overriding common sense. Arctic wolf, full-grown female, legs destroyed. You know what happens if Fish and Wildlife finds out you've got her? I know. You know what happens if Caleb Vance finds out? That man's been hunting wolves on protected land for 6 months. He finds out there's one alive under his nose. He'll burn your place down and shoot you both for good measure. Elias said nothing. There was nothing to say. He'd known all of this the moment he'd lowered his rifle. Doc set his bag on the workbench, shaking his head. You always were the stupidest smart man I ever met, Thorne. Get me some light, real light, not this dim garbage. They worked in silence, a surgery performed in a garage by a drunk veterinarian and a broken hunter. Doc's hands moved with the precision of 50 years' practice, cutting away dead tissue, irrigating the wound, setting what bones could be set. The wolf endured it all. Once, when Doc probed deep into the wound, she made a sound that raised the hair on Elias's neck. Not quite a growl, not quite a whimper. Something older than language, the cry of every wounded thing that ever lived. Hold her, Doc commanded. Elias placed his hands on her shoulders, felt the frantic drum of her heartbeat against his palms. The wolf's head turned, teeth bared, and for a moment he thought she would tear his throat out. Their eyes met. Some wordless understanding passed between them. She didn't bite. When Doc finally straightened, his back cracking like rifle shots, dawn was breaking gray and cold beyond the windows. The wolf lay motionless, the wreck of her legs splinted and wrapped in clean white bandages that were already seeping red. She might make it, Doc said, washing blood from his hands in the utility sink. Might not. You'll need antibiotics, strong ones. I can get them, but it'll cost. I'll pay. Money's not what I'm talking about. The old man dried his hands, studying Elias with those sharp eyes. Word gets out about this. We're both finished in this town. Vance owns the sheriff, owns half the county. You're harboring evidence in a livestock killing case. She didn't kill his cattle. You know that. I know that. But proof and truth are different animals out here. Doc picked up his bag, headed for the door, then stopped. Why'd you do it, Thorne? You've been dead inside since your girl passed. Why wake up now for a wolf? Elias looked at the broken animal on his workbench. She was watching him again, always watching, those gold eyes holding questions he couldn't answer. I don't know, he said finally. Maybe I'm tired of things dying. Doc Holloway nodded slowly. Just make sure you're not one of them. After he left, Elias stood alone in the garage with the wolf. Outside, the storm had finally broken. Weak sunlight filtered through dirty windows, catching dust motes in the air like suspended snow. The wolf's eyes closed. Her breathing deepened, steadied. Not sleep, not peace. Just the exhausted surrender of a body too damaged to fight anymore. Elias pulled up a chair and sat down to keep watch. He didn't know what came next, didn't have a plan. But for the first time in 10 years, he wasn't alone in his vigil. That had to count for something. 3 days passed in a haze of sleepless vigilance. Elias moved the wolf into the house, down to the basement where the wood furnace kept the cold at bay. He fashioned a bed from old blankets, positioned it away from the stairs where she could see anyone approaching. She didn't eat, didn't drink, just lay there with her eyes half open, tracking his every movement with a wariness that never dimmed. The antibiotics Doc had smuggled to him went into her water bowl, untouched. He tried grinding the pills into raw meat, but she turned her head away, as if she could smell the deception. "You're going to die out of pure spite," Elias told her on the third morning, exhaustion making him reckless with words. "Is that what you want? To prove some point about not needing help?" The wolf's ears flicked forward, the only acknowledgement she'd heard him. He named her Ghost, not for her white coat, though that was part of it, but for the way she haunted the basement, a presence that refused to be either fully alive or fully gone. Like him, he supposed. Like everything in this house since Sarah died. The fever came on the fourth day. Elias woke to find Ghost convulsing, her body racked with tremors that shook the blankets. Her breathing came in harsh gasps, and when he touched her flank, the heat radiating through her fur nearly burned his hand. The infection had taken hold. He called Doc at dawn. No pleasantries this time. Just 3 words. "She's dying. Come." Doc arrived with a bottle of bourbon and stronger antibiotics than the law allowed. He examined Ghost without speaking, his face growing darker with each passing minute. When he finally straightened, he didn't meet Elias's eyes. It's in her bloodstream now. Sepsis. Even with the drugs, she's got maybe a day. 2 if she's lucky. There has to be something else. There is. A bullet. Doc poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon, drank it in one swallow. "You did what you could, Thorne. More than most would. But nature's making her choice now, and we don't get a vote." Elias looked at Ghost. She was watching them through fever-glazed eyes, her chest rising and falling too fast, too shallow. He'd seen that look before. On Sarah's face, in those final moments when her body was shutting down despite everything he did to hold it here. "No," he said quietly. "No what? No bullet? Not yet." Doc set the bottle down hard. "You can't save everything by refusing to let go, Thorne. I learned that lesson 30 years ago when my wife was dying of cancer. You want to know what clinging to hope got me? 6 extra months of watching her suffer. That's not love. That's selfishness. Maybe." Elias knelt beside Ghost, placed his hand on her head. She didn't pull away. "But I'm not ready to give up on her. She's not your daughter." The words hung in the basement air like smoke. Elias felt them hit, felt the old wound tear open fresh. But he didn't look away from Ghost's eyes. "I know what she is," he said. "And I know what I am. And maybe that's exactly why I can't let her die without trying everything." Doc was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed, pulled a syringe from his bag. "This is experimental. Veterinary trial drug for septic shock. Works about half the time in dogs. Never tried it on a wolf. It'll either save her or kill her faster. Your call." Elias didn't hesitate. "Do it." The injection went into Ghost's haunch. She barely reacted, too far gone to care. Doc packed up his bag, paused at the stairs. Caleb Vance held a town meeting yesterday. Found 10 of his calves dead in the north pasture. Torn apart, he claims. He's convinced it was wolves. Got the whole town worked up. There's going to be hunters crawling all over these mountains by week's end. The wolf didn't do it. Probably not. Vance's cattle operation is as dirty as they come. But that doesn't matter when there's fear in the air and money to be made. He's offering $10,000 for proof of the killer, dead or alive. Elias felt his blood run cold. He knows about Ghost. Not yet. But secrets have a way of surfacing in small towns. especially when there's reward money involved. Doc climbed 3 steps, then turned back. You asked me why I came that first night, why I helped. You want the truth? Go ahead. Because you reminded me of something I'd forgotten. That sometimes the stupidest thing you can do is also the most human thing. And I figured maybe the world could use a little more stupid humanity. He tipped his cap. Good luck, Thorne. You're going to need it. After Doc left, Elias sat on the basement floor beside Ghost. Her breathing had changed, deeper but more labored, as if her body was fighting a war it couldn't see. He talked to her in the quiet, told her things he'd never said aloud. About Sarah, about the accident, about how he'd held on too tight and lost her anyway. I don't know if you can hear me, he said. Don't know if you even want to live. But if there's any part of you still fighting, I need you to keep fighting. Because I can't do this again. Can't watch something die in my arms and know I didn't do enough. Ghost's eyes opened. For just a moment they cleared, fixing on him with perfect focus. Her tongue moved, touching his hand where it rested on the floor. Just once. Just enough. Then her eyes closed again, and Elias was left in the silence with nothing but hope and the sound of her breathing. Outside, the Montana winter held the world in its grip. And somewhere in town, Caleb Vance was sharpening his knives. Bitter Creek's only diner smelled like burnt coffee and desperation. Elias hadn't been inside in 2 years, not since the owner's wife had cornered him with sympathy that felt more like curiosity about his grief. But Ghost needed supplies. Gauze, antiseptic, food she might actually eat. The bell above the door announced him like a traitor. Conversations died mid-sentence. 12 pairs of eyes swiveled to track him as he moved toward the back booth. The ghost of Bitter Creek, stepping into the land of the living. He ordered coffee he didn't want and tried to make himself invisible. It almost worked until the television above the counter flickered to life with the local news. Caleb Vance filled the screen, his face arranged in perfect lines of righteous anger. Behind him, tarps covered shapes in the snow. The camera lingered on one corner where a small hoof protruded, stiff and accusing. 10 calves, Vance was saying, his voice carrying the weight of manufactured grief. Slaughtered in the night. Not for food. For sport. This is what happens when we let predators run unchecked on our land. The camera panned across the kill site. Even through the grainy broadcast, Elias could see something was wrong. The blood pattern was too neat. The bodies arranged too carefully. Wolves didn't kill like that. They were efficient, brutal, but never methodical. I'm offering a $10,000 reward, Vance continued, for the white wolf that's been terrorizing our livestock. Dead or alive. It's time we took back our land. White wolf? Elias's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. How did Vance know about Ghost? Bastard, someone muttered from the counter. Should have shot every wolf in these mountains years ago. Amen to that, another voice agreed. My granddad lost half his herd to those things back in the 70s. Elias kept his eyes on the television. Vance was holding up photographs now, grainy trail camera images of a white shape moving through trees. Could have been Ghost. Could have been any Arctic wolf. But the town was already decided, already hungry for blood and the promise of reward money. He paid for coffee he hadn't drunk and left. Outside, 3 trucks were parked in a tight cluster, gun racks visible through rear windows. A group of men stood smoking, their laughter carrying sharp edges in the cold air. Heading up to the North Ridge tomorrow, one was saying. Vance is paying extra for whoever finds the den. Think it's really white? Never seen one like that before. Don't matter what color it is. 10,000 says it's dead. Elias walked past them to his truck, feeling their stares like knife points between his shoulders. He was halfway home when he realized he'd forgotten the supplies. The town was turning. He could feel it, that ugly shift that happened when fear found a target. It didn't matter that Ghost couldn't have killed those calves, not with her leg destroyed. Didn't matter that the whole scene smelled wrong. People wanted something to blame, and Vance had given them a monster. Back at the house, Ghost was awake. She'd managed to drag herself to the water bowl, though she still hadn't drunk. Her eyes tracked him down the basement stairs. Alert now. The fever's glaze finally burned away. "You made it through," Elias said. Something like relief cracking his voice. "Doc's going to be surprised." Ghost's ears flicked back, not at him, at something else. Some sound Elias couldn't hear. Then he heard it too. Tires on gravel, an engine cutting off, a door slamming with official firmness. The doorbell rang upstairs. Once, twice, then knocking, sharp and insistent. "Elias Thorne, this is Deputy Sarah Chen. I need to speak with you." Ghost tried to stand, fell, tried again. The wild panic in her eyes told Elias everything. She knew what that sound meant. Authority, danger, the end of safety. "Stay," he whispered, knowing it was useless. He grabbed the blankets, threw them over her, adding bags of old clothes on top. A pitiful hiding place. But it would have to do. The knocking came again, harder. "Mr. Thorne, I know you're home. Your truck's in the driveway." Elias climbed the stairs, forcing his breathing steady. He opened the door to find a woman in her 30s, deputy's badge catching the afternoon light. Her face was professional, but her eyes held something else. Exhaustion, maybe. Or doubt. "Deputy Chen. Mr. Thorne, I'm sorry to bother you. We received an anonymous call about unusual activity at your property. Blood trail leading to your garage. I need to check it out." "Blood trail?" That's what was reported. She looked past him into the house, her hand resting casually near her service weapon. Not threatening, just ready. "Mind if I come in?" Every instinct screamed at him to refuse, but refusing would only confirm suspicion. He stepped aside. "Help yourself." She moved through the house methodically. Kitchen. Living room. Her eyes caught on the photograph of Sarah on the mantel, the only picture he'd never taken down. She paused, studying it. "Your daughter?" "Was. I'm sorry." And she sounded like she meant it. "I lost my brother 5 years ago. Drunk driver. Some losses don't heal, they just get quieter." "Yeah." Elias watched her approach the basement door. His heart hammered against his ribs. "They do." Her hand touched the doorknob. From below, a sound, soft, almost imperceptible, the scrape of claws on concrete. Deputy Chen froze. Her eyes met his. "Mr. Thorne, is there something in your basement?" "Firewood. Furnace. That's not what I heard." The scraping came again, louder now, desperate. The deputy's hand moved to her weapon. "I'm going to need you to open that door." Time stretched. Elias could hear his own heartbeat, could feel the weight of the moment pressing down. If she found Ghost, it was over. For both of them. Then Deputy Chen's radio crackled. "All units, we have a situation at the Vance Ranch. Another dead calf. Suspect spotted in the area." Her hand hesitated on her weapon. She looked at Elias, then at the basement door, then back at him. "Winter's hard on animals," she said quietly. "Wolves, they look for warm places this time of year. Basements, garages, anywhere the cold can't reach them." She stepped back from the door. "You should be careful with your firewood, Mr. Thorne. Never know what might be sheltering down there." She walked to the front door, paused with her hand on the frame. Caleb Vance is a dangerous man. He's got the sheriff in his pocket and half the town believing his lies. If you've got something he wants, he won't stop until he has it. Her eyes held his. Be careful. Then she was gone, her cruiser pulling away in a spray of gravel. Elias stood in the empty house, his hands shaking. From below, Ghost made that sound again. Not pain, not fear. Something closer to a question. He descended the stairs to find her standing, wobbly but upright, her gold eyes fierce in the dim light. "You're going to get us both killed," he told her. She stared back at him, unrepentant. And despite everything, Elias smiled. Deputy Sarah Chen returned 3 days later. No radio call this time, no official excuse. She came at dusk when the world was caught between light and shadow, when secrets felt safer to share. Elias met her at the door before she could knock. "Deputy, I'm off duty." She wasn't in uniform, jeans and a heavy coat, her badge clipped to her belt out of habit more than necessity. "Can we talk?" He should have said no. Should have closed the door and pretended he'd never seen her. But something in her face, the way her eyes kept darting to her truck as if she was afraid of being followed, made him step aside. She didn't ask to go into the basement this time. Instead, she sat at his kitchen table, hands wrapped around the coffee he offered but didn't drink. The silence stretched until she finally broke it. "I know you have the wolf." Elias's blood went cold. "I don't know what you're talking about. Please don't." Her voice was tired. "I'm not here to arrest you. If I were, I'd have brought backup. I'm here because something's wrong in this town, and you're the only person who might actually care about the truth." "What truth?" She pulled a folder from her coat, spread photographs across the table. Crime scene images, the dead calves, close-ups of the wounds. "Look at these bite marks," she said, pointing. "See how clean they are? How uniform. Wolves don't kill like this. Their bites are ragged, desperate. These look like they were made with something else. Something with a blade." Elias studied the photos. She was right. The tears in the flesh were too precise, the spacing too measured. Vance did this himself. "I think so. Or had someone do it for him. He's been losing money for years. Bad investments, worse debts. But his cattle are insured, heavily insured. A wolf attack? That's an act of God. Full payout, no questions asked. And he gets to hunt Ghost legally." Sarah looked up sharply. Ghost? He'd said too much. But backing out now would only make it worse. That's what I call her. The wolf. She's still alive then. Not a question. A statement of fact that Sarah seemed almost relieved to confirm. Good. Because if Vance finds her, he won't just kill her. He'll make it public, turn her into a trophy. Proof that he was right all along. "Why are you telling me this?" She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "Because 6 months ago, I watched my boss take an envelope of cash from Caleb Vance in the parking lot of the station. Because every time I try to investigate his cattle operation, my reports disappear. Because I became a cop to protect people. And instead, I'm watching corruption rot this town from the inside out." Her voice cracked on the last words. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I can't fight him alone. But maybe if you help me prove what he's doing, we can stop him before anyone else gets hurt." Elias wanted to say no. Wanted to tell her this wasn't his fight. But he thought about Ghost downstairs, still healing, still vulnerable. Thought about Sarah's warning that Vance wouldn't stop until he had what he wanted. "What do you need?" "Evidence. Real evidence. Not just my suspicions." She tapped one of the photos. These calves were killed on Vance's north property. He claims wolves crossed the fence line, but I think he brought the bodies there himself. If we can find where they were actually killed, find proof of the staging, we might have a case. That's private property. We'd need a warrant, or we'd need to trespass. Her eyes met his. I know it's a lot to ask, but you saved that wolf when you could have walked away. That tells me you're someone who does the right thing, even when it's hard. From below, that familiar sound, the scrape of claws on concrete. Ghost, restless in her confinement. Sarah heard it too. She smiled, sad and knowing. Can I see her? Every instinct screamed no, but Sarah had already risked herself by coming here, by telling him the truth about Vance. Refusing her now felt like a betrayal of the trust she'd offered. She's not friendly, he warned. I didn't expect her to be. They descended the stairs together. Ghost was standing at the far corner of the basement, ears pinned back, every muscle tensed. Her lips peeled away from her teeth in a warning that needed no translation. But Sarah didn't approach. She just stood at the bottom of the stairs, studying the wolf with something like wonder. She's beautiful, she whispered, and terrified. She thinks I'm here to take her away. Aren't you? No. Sarah turned to face him. I'm here to help you keep her safe. Because if Vance gets his way, she's not the only one who'll suffer. It'll be every wolf in these mountains. Every predator that doesn't fit his version of the world. She climbed back upstairs, leaving Elias alone with Ghost. The wolf's eyes tracked her departure, then swung back to him. In their gold depths, he saw a question. Can we trust her? I don't know, Elias said aloud. But I don't think we have a choice. Ghost lowered herself carefully to the blankets, her injured legs stretched out before her. She watched him with those unblinking eyes that saw too much. Outside, night had fallen completely, and somewhere in the darkness, Caleb Vance was sharpening his knives and counting his money. The storm was coming. Elias could feel it. Ghost ate for the first time on the 7th night. Not much. Just a few strips of venison Elias had thawed from his freezer, meat from a deer he'd shot last autumn in what felt like another lifetime. She took it from his hand carefully, her teeth never quite touching his skin, her eyes never leaving his face. It was the closest thing to trust she'd offered. Elias sat on the basement floor across from her, a bottle of whiskey between his knees. He poured 2 fingers into a glass, raised it in a mock toast. To unlikely survival. Ghost's ears twitched. She settled onto her haunches, the splinted legs stretched awkwardly to one side. The swelling had gone down. Doc had come yesterday, checked her progress, and left shaking his head in disbelief. She should be dead, he'd muttered. Medically speaking, scientifically speaking, every way of speaking. But she's not. Stubborn doesn't even begin to cover it. Now, in the quiet of evening, Elias studied her in the dim light. She was thinner than when he'd found her, her ribs visible beneath the white fur. But there was strength in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Not acceptance. Never that. But a kind of wary acknowledgement that he wasn't trying to kill her. I had a daughter, he said suddenly. The whiskey made him reckless with words. Sarah. She was 12 when she died. Ghost's head tilted slightly, as if she understood the weight those words carried. We were driving home from her piano recital. She'd played Chopin. Made 2 mistakes and apologized for both, even though no one else noticed. His voice caught. He took another drink. The storm came fast. Too fast. We were halfway up the mountain road when the avalanche hit. The memory played out behind his eyes with cruel clarity. The roar of snow and ice. Sarah's scream cut short. The truck rolling, metal shrieking, and then silence. Terrible silence. The truck landed upside down. I could reach her through the broken window, but I couldn't pull her free. Her leg was pinned. I tried. God, I tried. But the cold was taking her, and all I could do was hold her hand and promise her it would be okay. He laughed bitterly. I lied. She knew I was lying, but she smiled anyway and said thank you for trying. Ghost made a sound low in her throat. Not quite a whine. Something softer. Something that might have been understanding if wolves could understand such things. The rescuers came 3 hours later. She'd been gone for 2 of them, but I didn't let go. Couldn't let go. They had to pry my fingers off her jacket. He held up his hands, studying them as if they belonged to someone else. 10 years. And I still feel her hand in mine. Still hear her voice saying, "Daddy, it's okay to let go." He drank again, deeper this time. The burn helped. Didn't fix anything, but it helped. I haven't talked about her to anyone, not even Doc, and he knew her since she was born. But you don't judge. Don't offer sympathy I don't want. You just listen like you understand what it means to lose everything. Ghost stood slowly, favoring her injured leg. Elias tensed, waiting for her to retreat to her corner like she always did. But instead she moved toward him, each step careful and deliberate. She stopped just within reach. Her gold eyes studied his face, his hands, the glass of whiskey he held. Then, so gently he almost didn't feel it, she touched her nose to the old scar on his left wrist. The scar he'd gotten from the truck's broken window, from holding Sarah's hand while metal cut into his skin. Ghost's tongue flicked out once, touching the scar. Not a lick. Just contact, acknowledgement. Elias's vision blurred. He set the glass down carefully, his hands shaking. "Yeah," he whispered. "You understand." They sat like that for a long moment. Man and wolf, 2 survivors of different tragedies, finding unexpected kinship in shared pain. Then the window shattered. Glass exploded inward. Elias threw himself over Ghost as the bullet punched through the far wall, embedding itself in concrete with a crack like breaking bone. Ghost scrambled out from under him, a snarl ripping from her throat. More glass breaking upstairs. The front window. The kitchen. Someone was shooting up the house. Elias grabbed Ghost, dragged her behind the furnace. She fought him, wild with instinct to flee, but he held on. "Stay down, stay down." The shooting stopped as suddenly as it started. In the ringing silence that followed, Elias heard an engine rev, tires spitting gravel. Laughter carried on the night air, cruel and taunting. He waited 5 minutes before moving. Upstairs, the house was destroyed. Every window blown out, cold air pouring through the holes. Bullet holes scarred the walls like accusations. On the front porch, he found a note weighted down with a rock. "Next time we won't miss. Give up the wolf or we'll burn you out." No signature. Didn't need one. Elias knew exactly who'd sent it. He crumpled the note in his fist and walked back inside. Ghost waited at the top of the basement stairs, her eyes reflecting what little light remained. She'd followed him up despite the danger, despite every instinct telling her to hide. Elias looked at the ruined house, at the wolf who'd somehow become his responsibility, at the choice he'd made that cold day in the snow when he'd lowered his rifle and decided not to let another thing die in his arms. "We're not giving up," he told her. "Not you, not me. Not this time." Ghost's ears came forward. In her eyes, he saw the same fierce determination he felt burning in his own chest. The war had begun. and they would face it together. They left at midnight. Elias carried Ghost wrapped in a blanket, her weight slight against his chest. She didn't struggle. Somehow she understood that the house with its shattered windows and bullet-scarred walls was no longer safe. The truck's headlights carved a tunnel through the darkness as they climbed the mountain road. Elias kept checking the rearview mirror, waiting for pursuit that hadn't come yet. But it would. Vance's men would be watching, waiting for daylight to make their move. He had maybe 6 hours to get Ghost somewhere safe. The old fire tower stood 3 miles into protected wilderness, accessible only by logging roads that hadn't seen maintenance in a decade. Elias had hunted these mountains his whole life. He knew every trail, every hidden valley. If anywhere could shelter them, it was here. Ghost's head lifted as he carried her up the tower's rusted stairs. Her nostrils flared, reading the night air for threats. Out here, she was in her element. Even injured, even dependent on him. This was her world, more than his. He set her down on the tower's platform. The view stretched for miles, moonlight painting the forest silver. Below, the valley where Bitter Creek huddled looked small and insignificant. "We'll wait until dawn," he told her. "Then I'll take you higher, past the ridge where Vance's men won't follow." Ghost limped to the platform's edge, her eyes scanning the tree line. She was searching for something. Her pack, maybe. The family she'd lost when the trap had stolen her freedom. Elias pulled out his phone. 1 bar of signal. Barely enough. He texted Deputy Chen. Had to move. They shot up the house, going dark for a while. Her response came 3 minutes later. "Be careful. Vance released his bloodhounds an hour ago. They're tracking something in your area." His blood went cold. Bloodhounds. Professional hunting dogs bred to track scent across any terrain. If they'd picked up Ghost's trail from his house, they'd follow it straight here. He looked at Ghost. She was watching him, her ears pricked forward. She'd sensed the change in him, the sudden spike of fear. "We need to move, now." But as he reached for her, sound carried up from the valley below. Dogs, not barking but baying, that long, mournful cry that meant they'd found the scent and were closing in. Elias grabbed his rifle, checked the magazine. 6 rounds. Not nearly enough if Vance had brought a full hunting party. He moved to the stairs, preparing to descend, when Ghost stepped in front of him. She blocked his path, her body tense, every line of her screaming one message. "No. We have to go," he said urgently. "They're coming." Ghost didn't move. Her eyes held his, and in their depths he saw something he'd never expected to see from a wild animal. Strategy, intelligence, a plan forming that didn't involve running. She turned and limped to the far side of the platform, where the tree line came closest to the tower. Then she looked back at him, waiting. Understanding hit him like cold water. She wasn't running because she couldn't. Not fast enough, not far enough with that leg. But she could do something else. Something wolves had done for thousands of years when cornered by superior numbers. She could fight. The baying grew louder, closer. Elias could see lights now, flashlights bobbing through the trees. 5. No. 6. More than he'd feared. Ghost positioned herself at the platform's edge, her injured leg braced. She was choosing her ground, the high position that would force the dogs to come up the narrow stairs in single file. Even crippled, she had teeth, and she knew how to use them. "No," Elias said. He moved to stand beside her. "If you fight, I fight. That's the deal." The first dog appeared at the base of the tower. A massive bloodhound, its nose to the ground, muscles rippling beneath the short fur. It looked up, spotted Ghost, and the baying turned to something deeper. Hunting cry, kill cry. 4 more dogs joined it. Behind them, men emerged from the forest. Elias recognized 2 of them, ranch hands from Vance's spread. The third was a stranger, but the rifle slung across his back marked him as professional. "Elias Thorne," a voice called up. Not Vance. One of the ranch hands. "Send the wolf down. We got orders to take it alive if possible." But orders change real quick if you make this difficult. "The wolf didn't kill those calves," Elias shouted back. "Vance is framing her for insurance fraud." Laughter echoed through the trees. "Don't care if she killed the president. We got $10,000 saying she's dead or delivered. Your choice how this goes." The dogs were straining at their leashes now, desperate to charge up the stairs. The men held them back, but barely, waiting for the order. Elias raised his rifle. "First one who lets those dogs loose gets a bullet, I promise you that. You got 6 rounds up there, old man. We got 6 dogs and 3 rifles. You do the math." Ghost pressed against his leg. Not for comfort, for support. She was preparing to charge down those stairs, to buy him time with her teeth and fury even if it killed her. Just like he'd held Sarah's hand as the avalanche took her, refusing to let go even when letting go was the only mercy left. "Run," he whispered to Ghost. "When I start shooting, you run." But Ghost didn't move. Her eyes stayed locked on the dogs below, her lips peeled back in a snarl that promised violence. She wasn't running. Not from him, not from this. The ranch hand's hand moved to release the first dog's leash. And then a voice cut through the night like a blade. "Federal Wildlife Protection. Release that animal and you're all under arrest." Deputy Sarah Chen stepped from the tree line, her badge held high, a pump shotgun in her other hand. Behind her, 3 more figures emerged. Rangers, real ones, with real authority that even Caleb Vance couldn't buy. The ranch hands froze. The dogs whined, confused by the sudden shift in dynamics. Sarah's eyes found Elias on the tower. She nodded once. A promise kept. "We're leaving," she called up. "All of us. And the wolf stays protected." The standoff held for 30 seconds that felt like hours. Then the ranch hands backed away, dragging their dogs with them. They melted into the forest, but their retreat felt temporary. Men like that didn't give up $10,000 without a fight. Sarah climbed the tower stairs, the rangers staying below to secure the perimeter. When she reached the platform, she was breathing hard, her face flushed with adrenaline. "That was closer than I wanted," she admitted. "I got your text and called in every favor I had. These rangers owe me from a case last year. They agreed to come, but they can't stay long. An hour, maybe 2. Where's Vance?" "That's the thing." Sarah pulled out her phone, showed him a photo. Crime scene tape. More dead cattle. He staged another kill tonight. While his men were hunting you, he was creating his next insurance claim. But this time I was ready. I documented everything before he could contaminate the scene. The photos showed clear evidence. Drag marks where bodies had been moved. Blood patterns that didn't match the wounds. And most damning, tire tracks leading from Vance's barn directly to the kill site. "I sent these to the state police an hour ago," Sarah continued. "They're opening an investigation. But Vance knows. Someone in the department tipped him off. That's why he sent his men after you tonight. He's trying to eliminate evidence before the real investigators arrive." Ghost moved closer to Sarah, sniffing cautiously. The deputy stayed very still, letting the wolf investigate on her own terms. After a moment, Ghost seemed satisfied and limped back to Elias's side. "She trusts you," Sarah said quietly. "That's rare. Wolves don't give trust easily. Neither do I." Elias checked his rifle again out of habit. What happens now? Now we wait for dawn. The state police are sending a team, but they're 3 hours out. Until then, we hold this position. She looked at Ghost. Then we keep her alive long enough to prove Vance is a liar. They didn't have 3 hours. The fire started in the valley below, orange flames licking through dry brush with terrifying speed. The wind carried it upward, toward the tower, a wall of heat and smoke that turned night into hellish daylight. He's burning us out, Elias said, his voice flat with realization. Vance doesn't care about evidence anymore. He's going to kill us all and blame it on the fire. Sarah's radio crackled. One of the rangers, voice tight with fear. Deputy, we've got armed men moving through the trees. At least 8. They're not trying to hide anymore. Through the smoke, Elias saw them. Vance's hunting party, rifles raised, spreading out in a semicircle that blocked every escape route except straight down into the flames. Then Caleb Vance himself stepped into view. Tall, silver-haired, wearing an expression of righteous certainty that made Elias's blood boil. He held a hunting rifle worth more than most people's cars, scope glinting in the firelight. Thorne, Vance called up. You've been harboring evidence in a federal investigation. That's a crime. Send the wolf down and maybe you walk away from this. We both know you're lying, Elias shouted back. About the cattle, about the wolf, about everything. Vance smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Who's going to believe a drunk hermit over a respected rancher? I've got witnesses. I've got dead cattle. I've got a town that wants blood. What do you have? The truth. Truth is what people believe, Thorne. And they believe me. Sarah stepped forward, her badge held high. I'm placing you under arrest for insurance fraud, destruction of evidence, and attempted murder. Drop your weapon. Vance's smile widened. Deputy Chen, the idealistic little girl playing cop. Your boss already knows you're here, already knows you're protecting a criminal. By morning, you'll be fired, if you survive the night. He raised his rifle, aiming not at Sarah, but at Ghost. Everything happened at once. Ghost saw the rifle's movement and lunged forward despite her injured leg. Sarah dove to intercept. Vance fired. The bullet meant for Ghost caught Sarah in the shoulder, spinning her around. She fell hard, her weapon skittering across the platform. Ghost didn't hesitate. She launched herself off the platform edge, 40 feet of empty air, landing in the brush below with a crash that should have killed her. But she rolled, found her feet, and charged straight at Vance through the flames. Elias was already moving, his rifle coming up. He fired once, twice, shots that went deliberately wide, but close enough to make Vance's men scatter. Then he was down the stairs, following Ghost into the inferno. The smoke was thick enough to choke on. Through the orange haze, he saw Ghost reach Vance. The rancher swung his rifle like a club, the stock catching Ghost across the head. She went down hard, stunned but not unconscious. Vance raised the rifle for another blow, one that would crush Ghost's skull. Elias hit him like a freight train. They went down together, rolling through burning brush. Elias felt skin blister, smelled his own hair singeing, didn't care. All that mattered was getting between Vance and Ghost. They grappled in the flames. Vance was younger, stronger, but Elias had 10 years of grief fueling him. Every punch landed with the weight of loss, of rage, of all the things he should have done to save Sarah, but couldn't. This time would be different. Vance's elbow caught him in the ribs. Elias tasted blood. But he held on, dragged the rancher down, felt the man's struggles weaken as smoke filled his lungs. Rangers appeared through the flames, pulling them apart. Sarah was there too, blood soaking her shoulder, but her good hand holding Vance's own rifle on him. "You're done," she gasped. "It's over." Vance looked at her with pure hatred. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. But his voice lacked conviction. They all heard it. The sirens in the distance. The helicopter rotors cutting through smoke-filled sky. Help was coming. Real help that even Caleb Vance couldn't buy or threaten away. Elias crawled to Ghost. She lay panting in the ash, her white fur gray with soot. Blood matted the fur on her head where Vance had struck her. But her eyes opened when he touched her, and that small sound came from her throat. Recognition, relief. "We made it," he whispered. "We both made it." Ghost's tongue touched his burned hand once, before her eyes closed again. The veterinary clinic's waiting room smelled like antiseptic and fear. Elias sat on the floor, his back against the wall, too exhausted to care about the chairs lined up like accusations. His hands were wrapped in gauze, burns from the fire already blistering beneath. But he couldn't feel them. Couldn't feel anything except the weight of waiting. Ghost was in surgery, had been for 3 hours. Doc Holloway had met the ambulance at the clinic, his face grave when he saw Ghost's condition. Head trauma, smoke inhalation, the leg injury reopened from her 40-foot jump. He'd said nothing as they wheeled her in, just squeezed Elias's shoulder once and disappeared through the surgical doors. That had been 3 hours ago. Sarah sat across from him, her own shoulder bandaged, her uniform shirt cut away by the paramedics. She'd refused to go to the hospital until she knew Ghost would survive. Stubborn, Elias thought. Just like the wolf. State police arrested Vance an hour ago, she said quietly. Insurance fraud, arson, attempted murder. They found accelerant in his truck. Found the knife he used to stage the cattle wounds. Found bank records showing he was 3 months from bankruptcy. Elias nodded, but didn't speak. The news felt distant, unimportant. All that mattered was behind those surgical doors. The sheriff resigned. Sarah continued. Turns out he'd been taking Vance's money for 6 years. Half the department's under investigation now. She laughed bitterly. Funny how fast the righteous fall when someone finally bothers to look. Ghost saved us, Elias said. His voice came out rough, damaged by smoke. She could have run when the fire started, could have saved herself. But she charged at Vance instead. Bought us time. She charged because of you. Sarah leaned forward, her good hand gripping her knee. You saved her first. She remembered that. Animals don't forget kindness any more than they forget cruelty. The surgical doors opened. Doc Holloway emerged, still wearing his blood-stained scrubs. His face was unreadable, and Elias felt his heart stop. She's alive, Doc said, and Elias could breathe again, stubborn as they come. The head wound was bad, concussion at minimum. Smoke damaged her lungs, the legs worse than before. But she's alive. Can I see her? Not yet. She needs rest, needs time. Doc sat down heavily beside him. But there's something else you need to know. The state wants to take custody of her. They're saying she's evidence in a federal case. Once she's healed, they'll transfer her to a facility. What kind of facility? Doc's silence was answer enough. Elias stood up so fast the room spun. They're going to put her down. After everything, they're going to kill her. It's protocol, Sarah said, though her voice was hollow. Wild animals involved in attacks, even justified ones. The law doesn't have room for nuance. Then the law is wrong. I know. Sarah stood too, wincing as her shoulder protested. But I'm just a deputy. I don't have the authority to fight this. Elias looked at Doc. The old veterinarian met his eyes and nodded slowly. However, Doc said carefully, paperwork has a way of getting lost, especially in a small clinic with outdated filing systems. If Ghost happened to be transferred to a wildlife sanctuary before the state filed the proper forms, well, mistakes happen. You'd risk your license? Already risked it the night I operated on her in your garage. Might as well finish what we started. Doc stood, his joints cracking. There's a sanctuary 3 states over, run by a woman who doesn't ask questions and doesn't file reports until she's good and ready. If Ghost can travel in 2 weeks, I can make arrangements. Hope, dangerous and fragile, bloomed in Elias's chest. They'd let her live? They'd let her live. In an enclosure, supervised, but alive. It's not freedom, but it's better than a bullet. Elias thought about Ghost's eyes, the fierce independence that burned in them even when she was dying. An enclosure would break her spirit slowly, day by day, until nothing remained but a tame shell of what she'd been. But she'd be breathing, and breathing meant possibility. Do it, he said, whatever it takes. The town learned the truth within days. Sarah's evidence, combined with the state investigation, painted a picture so damning that even Vance's supporters went quiet. The dead cattle had been his own, killed with a blade and arranged to look like predator attacks. The insurance money was supposed to save his failing ranch. Instead, it bought him a cell and a trial date. Bitter Creek's opinion of Elias shifted overnight. The drunk hermit became the man who'd exposed corruption. The Ghost became a hero. People he'd avoided for 10 years suddenly wanted to shake his hand, buy him coffee, hear the story firsthand. He hated every minute of it. The only place that felt real was the clinic, where Ghost recovered in a modified kennel Doc had built specially for her. She could stand now, though she swayed when she put weight on the injured leg. Could eat without assistance. Could watch Elias through the chain link with eyes that held questions he couldn't answer. He visited her every day, sat on the floor outside her kennel and talked about nothing and everything. She never approached the fence, but she stopped retreating to the corner when he arrived. Small progress, but progress nonetheless. On the 14th day, Doc pulled him aside. She's strong enough to travel. The sanctuary's ready. We leave tomorrow at dawn. Tomorrow, the word fell too soon and not soon enough. There's something else. Doc handed him a folder. Inside, custody papers. The sanctuary director, she's willing to let you visit. Once a month if you want. Ghost will never be truly wild again, but she'll have space. Trees. Other wolves eventually. Other wolves. A pack, a family. The folder grew heavy in Elias's hands. He thought about Sarah, his daughter, and how he'd held on too tight when letting go was the only mercy left. Thought about Ghost and the choice ahead. What if she doesn't want to go? He asked quietly. Then we'll know, Doc said. But I think you already know what she needs. Question is whether you're strong enough to give it to her. That night, Elias sat outside Ghost's kennel one last time. She watched him from her corner, gold eyes reflecting the dim light. Tomorrow you leave, he told her. Not freedom, but close enough. You'll have sky, earth. Maybe find a pack that needs a warrior like you. Ghost's ears pricked forward. I'm sorry I can't give you more. Sorry I can't let you run these mountains like you were meant to. But this is the best I can do. The best anyone can do. He stood to leave. Behind him, a sound. Soft, almost questioning. Ghost had moved to the fence. She pressed her nose against the chain link, and Elias's hand moved without thought, fingers threading through to touch her muzzle. She didn't pull away. For just a moment, man and wolf connected across the barrier between their worlds. Thank you, Elias whispered. For fighting, for surviving, for reminding me what that looks like. Ghost's tongue touched his fingers once. Then she turned and limped back to her corner, settling down with her eyes on him, watching over him the way she'd always done, the way she would have done for her own pack. Tomorrow she'd leave, but tonight they kept vigil together, two survivors bound by understanding deeper than words. 1 month later, winter held the mountains in its deepest grip. Elias stood at the forest's edge, his truck idling behind him, exhaust rising in white clouds against the gray sky. In his hands, he held the key to Ghost's transport crate. The sanctuary had called 3 days ago. The court had ruled. Ghost would be relocated to a conservation area in Wyoming, 200 acres of protected wilderness where wolves could live semi-wild. Not freedom, but the closest thing the law would allow. They were letting Elias bring her. Doc Holloway leaned against the truck bed, watching him with knowing eyes. You're stalling, I'm thinking. Same thing. Doc pulled out a flask, took a sip, offered it to Elias. She's ready. Question is whether you are. Elias declined the drink. His days of drowning in whiskey felt like another lifetime. He'd poured the last bottle down the drain the night after the fire, and hadn't touched one since. Some vices you could survive. Others just delayed the living. He opened the crate door. Ghost emerged slowly, cautiously, her injured leg still causing a slight limp that would never fully heal. But she was strong again, her white coat thick against the cold, her eyes clear and alert. She tested the air, reading it for threats and possibilities. Then she saw the forest. Everything about her changed. Her ears came forward, her body tensed. A low sound built in her chest, not quite a growl, not quite a whine. Something older, something that recognized home. The conservation area is 3 hours north, Elias said quietly. They're waiting for us. You'll have other wolves there eventually. Handlers who'll keep you fed. Protection from hunters. Ghost wasn't listening. Her attention was fixed on the tree line, where shadows moved between the pines. Elias's breath caught. More wolves. 3 of them. No, 4. A female in the lead, smaller than Ghost, her coat gray and silver. Behind her, young ones. Adolescents, not quite grown, moving with the gangly uncertainty of youth learning to hunt. Doc saw them too. Well, I'll be damned. The gray female stepped into the open. She was scarred, one ear torn half away by some old fight. But her eyes were bright, intelligent, assessing. She looked at Ghost, at the men, at the truck, calculating risks with the precision of a survivor. Ghost made a sound Elias had never heard from her. A soft chuffing, almost questioning. The gray female answered, a similar sound, and suddenly Elias understood. They knew each other. Her pack, Doc breathed. They've been searching for her. The gray female took another step forward. The youngsters behind her stayed back, watchful, but their body language spoke of curiosity rather than fear. One of them, the smallest, had Ghost's distinctive white markings on its chest. Her child. Ghost's child. Ghost turned to look at Elias. In her eyes, he saw the choice laid bare. The conservation area offered safety, food, protection. But these wolves offered something the law could never provide. Family. Elias thought about Sarah. About the moment he'd finally let go of her hand, accepting what he'd known for hours but refused to believe. How that letting go had felt like dying. How it had also felt like the last gift he could give her. Peace, release, the freedom to stop fighting. He'd held on too tight once, lost everything because he couldn't accept what needed accepting. Not this time. Go, he said quietly. Go on, Ghost. They're waiting. Ghost didn't move immediately. She limped toward him, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her body. Close enough to see the small scars from the trap, the surgery, the fire, all the damage she'd survived. She pressed her nose against his hand, the way she had that last night in the clinic. A goodbye. A thank you. An acknowledgement of the strange alliance that had saved them both. Then she turned and walked toward her pack. The limp was obvious, would always be obvious. But the gray female didn't seem to care. She touched noses with Ghost, a gesture of recognition and welcome. The youngsters crowded around, and the smallest one, the pup with white markings, pushed its way through to press against Ghost's side. Ghost's head lowered. She nuzzled the pup, a gesture so tender it made Elias's throat tighten. Then she lifted her head and sang. The howl started low, building until it filled the valley with sound. The other wolves joined her, their voices braiding together in a song older than human law, older than human understanding. A song of pack and survival and the fierce joy of being alive against all odds. Doc was watching Elias carefully. They'll come looking for her. The conservation people. They'll want to know where she is. She escaped during transport, Elias said. Forced the crate door. Ran into the forest before we could stop her. Wolves are clever like that. Paperwork will be a nightmare. Good thing paperwork gets lost all the time in your clinic. Doc smiled. Good thing indeed. The pack was moving now, melting into the forest. Ghost paused at the tree line, looked back one final time. Elias raised his hand. Not quite a wave, just acknowledgement. She'd given him something he'd thought was lost forever. The ability to let go with grace instead of desperation. To understand that some things couldn't be saved, only set free. Ghost disappeared into the trees. Within seconds, the pack was gone, leaving only tracks in the snow. Evidence of passage. Proof of survival. Elias stood there for a long time, watching the empty forest. The cold bit through his coat, but he barely felt it. He was remembering another winter, another loss. But this time, the memory didn't drag him under. This time, it felt like a door closing gently instead of slamming shut. You all right? Doc asked. Yeah. Elias turned back to the truck. On the hood, he left the transport papers, let the wind take them. I think I finally am. They drove back to Bitter Creek in comfortable silence. The town would ask questions. The sanctuary would demand answers. But Elias would face it the way he'd learned from Ghost. With fierce stubbornness and the knowledge that some truths were worth protecting, even when the whole world wanted different answers. At home, his house still bore the scars of that night. Boarded windows, bullet holes in the walls. But it felt different now. Not a tomb. Just a place where a man lived, grieved, and somehow found the strength to keep living. He walked to his workshop and opened the cabinet. Inside, bottles of whiskey lined the shelves. He'd kept them as a reminder, a temptation he could choose to resist every single day. Now he packed them into a box, drove them to Doc's clinic, and left them by the dumpster. Doc found him there. Cleaning house, something like that. Elias looked at the bottles. I don't need them anymore. What changed? Elias thought about Ghost's eyes, about the moment she'd chosen her pack over safety, about how sometimes the bravest thing you could do was trust that letting go didn't mean forgetting. I learned how to say goodbye, he said finally. The right way. In the weeks that followed, life in Bitter Creek settled into a new rhythm. Caleb Vance faced trial and conviction. The sheriff was replaced. Deputy Sarah Chen got her promotion. The town slowly healed from the corruption that had poisoned it. And sometimes, on cold nights when the moon was bright, Elias would stand on his porch and listen. The wind carried sounds across the valley. Distant, wild, free howling. He'd smile then, knowing Ghost was out there. Running with her pack through the Montana wilderness, teaching her pup how to survive winters and humans and all the dangers the world could throw at them. Living the life she'd been meant for, marked forever by their brief alliance, but not defined by it. Some things weren't meant to be kept. Some things could only be witnessed, protected for a moment, and then released to find their own way home. Sarah had been right. Wolves didn't forget kindness, but neither did they need it forever. In the spring, someone reported seeing a white wolf in the high country, running with a pack. State officials investigated but found only tracks. Beautiful tracks in the melting snow, leading deeper into the wilderness where maps ended and questions had no answers. Elias never confirmed or denied the sighting, just smiled when asked and said nothing at all. After all, some secrets were sacred. Some debts repaid not in words, but in silence and the gift of freedom. And some ghosts, it turned out, were meant to keep running forever. You know, Ghost and Elias both had every reason to give up. The wolf had lost her pup. The man had lost his daughter. But somehow, in that frozen Montana wilderness, they found something worth fighting for. Each other. I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced an unlikely friendship that changed your life? Maybe with an animal, maybe with a stranger who became family. Leave a comment and share your story. I read every single one, and your experiences inspire the stories I tell. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to the channel. We've got more stories coming that'll make you laugh, cry, and remember why human kindness still matters in this world. Thanks for spending this time with me. It means more than you know. Until next time, take care of each other out there.